So this is a quality of God that we must recognize. And we're going to commemorate it. This is in our own language, in English. And you drive your car and you say God is running everything. And you look at everything and you say God is running everything. Because this is the condition of belief in God. The Quran says very clearly, when something good happens to you, it is from God. When something bad happens to you, it is from you. But God is running everything. God created the fire. You can use it to cook a steak, from a raw steak to a delicious cooked steak, unless you like it raw. But you can also put your finger in that fire and burn your finger. So God created the fire to be in your service, but if you choose to put your finger in it and suffer, then this is from you, not from God. But it is God's law that made the fire as burning. If you put your finger in it, it burns. It's God's law. It's one of the physical laws. There are many invisible laws. Like if you disobey God, if you go drink, for example, it's exactly like putting your finger in the fire, but the punishment is not as visible. You can be sure you'll pay. It's just like that, like the fire and putting your finger in it. Alcohol and drinking it. Drugs and taking them. Adultery and committing it. All these things, there are laws that God's laws govern them. And the punishment, the physical, the fire, putting your finger in it, the punishment for God for the sins are exactly in the same way, but they're not as visible. They're just as painful, if not worse. And this explains all the problems we see in the world. The people breaking God's law and paying the price, just like putting their finger in the fire. What is our role? What do we do? God is doing everything. We do only one thing, one decision, to be with God or not. After that, God takes over. But we are absolutely free in that decision. To submit is already done. And the choice, our choice, is to willingly submit or unwillingly submit. And those people who don't believe in God out there, they are submitting to God except unwillingly. I mean, they can't control the number of beats of their heart, for example. I mean, that's one of the visible things. But God runs everything. When Reagan decides to agree with the Russians on limiting nuclear weapons, he's not deciding anything. He's just like Joseph's brothers. He thinks he's deciding to meet with the Russians, or vice versa. But God runs everything. We know also that the angels are as free as we are, from the incident where Satan refused to obey God and bow down before Adam. God wants his creatures to be free as far as that decision is concerned, until the day of judgment. The eternal day of judgment, there's no more. We'll see everything, and we'll submit. Everybody will submit, including the dwellers of hell. It turns out that if we believe that anybody is doing anything, this is shirk. This is idol worship. You're putting somebody who's doing something with God next to God. It negates the idea that God runs everything. So if you think anybody is doing anything, I mean, this is, by definition, is shirk, idolatry. This is why we're going to remind ourselves, against Satan's ideas. We're going to always say, God runs everything. You're going to do it for a while and then you'll forget, like I forget. So I'm going to keep after me and after you, and we're going to repeat that. I'm going to remind you and you remind me, and we will always continuously, until every cell in our body is declaring God is running everything. Because this, like I said, sheds a whole new light on submission, the idea of submission. And this sign out there on the wall, happiness is submission to God, is a profound sign. There's a lot more to it than meets the eye. You're going to be perfectly happy. And this dhikr, where God runs everything, is going to help you into total submission, because anytime you start to complain or object, you're going to remind yourself, God runs everything. I'm complaining against God. I'm complaining from God is doing this, so I'm complaining. I don't like it. Sometimes we turn into complainers, and we have to catch ourselves. Complainers will complain when things are good. They'll complain when things are bad. They get into a rut, and they'll complain continuously. That's objection. That's the opposite of submission. There's a good example of decisions. The main issue of the Muslim perspective, we decided to print a certain number, and we said, okay, we're going to get to these Muslim organizations. They don't deserve the Muslim perspective anyway, so we're going to skip one, do one and skip one. So we'll send only Muslim perspectives to half of them. And okay, we made a decision, right? We make decisions, but God makes the decision, and God's decision prevails. So the next day, the press, they call me and they say, guess what? We made a mistake. I say, what? Should we change the page? They printed one page on the wrong side. So they have to do it over for nothing. So we ended up with a large number of Muslim perspectives anyway, and we had to send the perspective to everybody. But this is an example of deciding, right? We decided to eliminate these names, but God decided, no, you're going to send it to every single one of them. God runs everything. Okay, tubu ilallah, repent. الحمد لله وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. I believe this dhikr is very important, very significant, and I believe it's going to help all of us. So I'm going to repeat again, impress on you that wherever you have a chance, continuously, God is running everything, God is running everything, God is running everything. Silently and loudly, and every chance you get. And eventually, like I said, every cell in your body will be pronouncing this important decision. This is the requirement to make it to heaven. I want to talk again about being upset and fighting with anybody. Being upset, complaining, fighting. For your own good, you shouldn't do that. We should not do that for our own good, because it backfires manifold. When you say a hurting word or a hurting look, the Quran goes all the way to suspicion. Inside of your head, if you're suspicious of some, you look at me and I have a stomach ache or something, and I'm making a face, and you say, this guy is not friendly to me, you've committed a sin. And it's going to backfire on you. You're the one who's going to suffer. You must seek excuses for the people. If I pass by you and I'm making a face, it is not because I hate you. Probably I do. Maybe I do. But what you are supposed to do is, oh, he must have a headache or a stomach ache or something is bothering him. And you love me instead of hate me for your own good. But if I am making a face, if I'm passing by you and I'm making a face, and you assume that I do it because I don't like you, and it is true, even that little suspicion in your head will hurt you, will backfire on you. So let alone being loud, calling names. These backfire on you for your own protection. For your own peace of mind and happiness, don't do it. And the reason is that the mechanism of it is that it is objection. It is complaining against what God is doing. God is running everything. And if your husband or your wife or your friend is behaving in a certain way, it's because of something you have done. You have to join your wife or your husband or your friend and call you names or whatever the other person is doing. You ally yourself with your enemy against yourself because it's something you have done. So God is punishing me for something I have done. I have stepped out of God's laws. And always remind yourself, God is running everything. And don't say, I'm talking to somebody else. I'm talking to you, every one of you. And me. I have to remind myself. I think I'm the oldest person in this place. Anybody older than me? Gosh. See, from my experience, as being your elder, I'll give myself the privilege of advising you. From experience, it backfires on you when you lose your temper. Happiness is submission to God. You have to make a decision right now that you will never be upset. You will never complain. Let other people complain. Let them be upset. Let them call you names. You take the defeated side because for your own good. Because believe me, you're a lot happier this way. And you end up victorious. There is nothing in this world that is worth being upset about. Believing that God runs everything, as you read in the Quran, equals, or is better than, is better than owning everything in this world and twice as much. If you own Manhattan and all the real estate on Manhattan, they consider you rich. So I'm not talking about Manhattan, I'm talking about all of the United States, all of Japan. If you own Hong Kong, you'll be rich with all the real estate over there. But believing in God the proper way is better than owning everything in the whole world and twice as much. Does this make you happy? It should. The simplest thing you do as a believer, which is praying 5 times a day, if you put it in the right perspective of a person who believes, is the greatest thing that can happen to anybody. Okay, I want you to put yourself in this situation. You receive a telephone call from the White House. You say, Frank, Jürgen, you're invited to have lunch with the president next Wednesday. Okay, I'm going to use Frank as an example. Frank immediately will call his work. I'm not coming to work on Wednesday. And will call his friends. Guess what? I'm invited to lunch at the White House. And he'll find the best clothes to put on for that important meeting. Well, 5 times a day you have an appointment with the King of Kings. If you believe that God runs everything, that God is the president of the whole world, that Reagan is a dinky servant, an insignificant creature of God, if you really know that, well, if this is what you will do for every prayer, you have an appointment with God 5 times a day. You're going to call work and say, I'm not coming to work because I have an appointment with the president of the whole universe. So this puts things in perspective. You're going to seek excuses not to go to the White House. I have a headache, Mr. President. Most people will go even though they have the worst headache, a migraine, and everything. They'll still go. Okay, I finished the main topic, and there are 2 points that I would like to mention before I close. One of them is something that I started to do. I should have done it a long time ago. There's a statement in the Quran that says, eat and drink, but in moderation, not too much. So I started doing this after Ramadan, and it feels great not to fill your stomach too much. I mean, look at the wisdom of the Quran. Kulu washrabu wala tusrifu. Eat and drink, but in moderation, not too much. And it's a great thing. If I continued the same, I wouldn't be able to wear this suit. I'm beginning to put on some of my clothes that I had discarded. God created in the universe. This will help us appreciate God and how He is running everything, and will induce us to make this new dhikr continuously. In the last issue of Parade magazine, Carl Sagan wrote an article about billions and billions. God created 1 billion trillion stars. Now forget the planets that go with these stars, and forget the fact that the sun is one of the dim stars. A bright star is defined as a star that is 1 million times, at least 1 million times as bright as our sun. So God created 1 billion trillion stars. And here there's a table from Parade that says